I became a museum development officer at the provincial government, and I managed 2 museums. My job was to advise local authorities, other museums, how to develop museums and how to manage them, how to plan them. It was a fantastic opportunity because I got to see the world, I got to see the problems, and you learn to interact with other people, and you are called in as a specialist to advise on museum planning and exhibitions, education programs, all these sort of things. Don't worry, we'll get to that just now. I joined Korea in 1990, became head of research, National Culture History Museums. I was in charge of about between 10 and 12 staff members. Most of them all of them in the cultural history or cultural sciences. Then I became a manager of a hole in the ground. For 4 years I managed a meteorite impact crater. One of the best preserved ones in the world. I actually volunteered to become manager because the place was going down. And it was probably the most challenging and the most exciting part of my career so far. In 2005, I decided I had enough working for a boss. So I became a consultant. And I tell you that a museum career prepares you very well to become a consultant, to start flying on your own. I'm doing a consultant. And in 2013, I joined MTQ, Museum of Tropical Queensland, as a project officer, but I still do consulting. So I do a bit of both. Here's my next prop. I put it down, and have a look at it. Defining a museum, now that's on a mug. Museum. What is it? Now this is a long-winded explanation by International Council of Museums. I just read it. A museum is a non-profit, permanent institution in the service of society and its development. Next thing, open to the public. So the definition, it's a sentence. Which acquires, conserves, researches, communicates, and exhibits the tangible heritage. Here we go, tangible heritage. Early Stone Age tool, Africa, 500,000 years. If you feel that people have to be touching them, you know, that's magic. You're privileged to handle objects like that. And because I haven't brought my white gloves along, but it doesn't matter. That's been in the bush for 500,000 years. So. Communicates and exhibits the tangible, intangible heritage. Those are the stories. This is one of my medals for swimming. It's just a medal, but it's a big story behind the medal, how I suffered to complete the swim. The stories of people, and its environment for the purpose of education, study, and enjoyment. So if you go to ICOM, I-C-O-M, you find this lovely definition. Just quickly, there's an overlap between what museums do and what others do. Everybody knows about archives, and here it says what they do: original historical evidence in the shape of documents, audio, visuals, oral histories. Libraries, similar, printed and published matter. Museums, original artifacts and specimens. Botanical gardens, they do living plants and also plant specimens, so there's already a grey area. So a museum career is not limited to a museum only. If you want to go to heritage, there's a whole menu here where you can go. Zoological gardens. A zoo is actually a museum of living animals. What else is it? Heritage agencies, those are the guys who lay down the law. Government, local government, state government. Administration and application of heritage legislation. And you see, there's lots of functions and there's lots of overlaps. So it's possible to migrate for someone with a museum career to something else, to one of these institutions, because there are synergies and similarities. Right, what do museums do? 4 key performance areas. I call it heritage resources management. Now, this is a very technical term, don't worry, I'll explain what it means. Janelle will talk about visitor services and community services, and I will talk about management support services. Okay, this is another Stone Age tool, a little bit younger, probably about 250,000 years ago. Beautifully manufactured. And that fits in somewhere in this very complicated circle which tells you what things to be dealing with. We're basically dealing with natural objects or cultural objects. They can be movable, they can be immovable. Because museums also deal with buildings, they also deal with archaeological sites, they deal with traditions, beliefs of people. And what's not on in here, I don't know why, are animals and plants, and that includes domesticated animals and plants. With this, these things are becoming museum pieces. So this is just a really complicated diagram to explain what do we work with. Immovable and movable stuff, intangible, which means invisible, and tangible things. Outdoor, indoor, people, nature, culture. Right. Resources management. You get guys called curators. They are experts in charge of themes and collections. So they deal with the acquisition of objects. The acquisition can be done either by bequest or donation, or I just took it from the bush. Probably you probably call it theft, but too long ago. So they collect objects or artifacts or specimens. They do research on it to find out where it comes from, what's the history behind it, and they spill out the research results. You know, they have to tell somebody what they found in terms of exhibition texts, publications, lectures, talks like that. So they oversee the care and display information about objects in the areas. They help in assembling catalogues and museum and object management systems. They are often called upon to give advice regarding their specialist fields. So suddenly the curator's gone, because he's traveling somewhere else to advise somebody else on what to do with their collections and how to collect about research. They also sometimes act as consultants on behalf of the museum. So they are able to sell their expertise and the museum gets remunerated for it. Now who works there? Basically either natural scientists or human scientists. So there's a whole list here. I think JCU is providing courses in basically everything here. Marine, freshwater, terrestrial biologists, various specialist fields, geologists, paleontologists, ecologists, vets, veterinarians, and then the archaeologists, anthropologists, military history, culture history, art history. What you need to be a good researcher, a reader, and a writer, and sometimes a bit of an introvert because you sit and work with some of these people. They are real introverts. They don't want to talk to other people. They want to talk to the objects and to the rest of the research. So this is one class of people. Then you get the registers, who are in charge of the documentation system. Now, when these things go into the museum, this is a bottle. It gets a number and a label, and it gets into a computer system which tells you where can you find it. And that's what we call basically in the museum a documentation system. So they have to be very good, very organized people, good record people, careful with details. They can be sometimes extremely irritating. If you ask them a question and they say, well, the details are not correct. And it's even more irritating if somebody new comes and they start developing a completely new documentation system. So you've got 3 or 4 systems running. Who actually does this work? Often it's former curators of collections, but there can also be librarians, archivists, and even IT specialists, because this is now all computerized, computer-driven. Then the people responsible for restoring it. Now, when this came from the bush, it was full of mud and dirt. There's another expert who looks after the safety of the objects on display and in the storerooms and knows how to clean them properly. And that's very specialized. And there's only one course in Australia, I found, which offers these tertiary conservation courses. It's Melbourne University. Many of the other people, they sort of picked up the knowledge by reading and by looking at their peers. So these are the conservation people. So if any object goes into the museum, it can't come to the storeroom because it maybe have bugs in it, and contagious things, and asbestos, whatever. It has to be decontaminated, goes in quarantine, then gets cleaned, and then eventually somebody puts a number on it, it goes in the storeroom or an exhibition. So there's a whole path with this little object goes, and of course it needs to be photographed and digitized. Then finally, a bit about management and support. We've got a director. I used to be a director. It was a lot of fun, because on one hand it was fun, but I found the most difficult was dealing with people. Director is often somebody with a background in natural or human sciences, but forget it. If you are a museum director, you can forget about your career in research, because you're dealing with human resources, IT, buildings, disgruntled customers, staff, and things like that. So this is what a director does. represents the museum in contact with the public, and also make sure that the museum doesn't run behind time, or that the budget is still complied with. Sorry? That's correct. And then there's a list of other guys working in the museum as well. So it's not only the experts, it's the conservators, the IT, the natural scientists, librarians, graphic designers. They design our marketing materials, exhibition panels. If you're going to be an exhibition designer with a bent for interior design, similar, a bit like architecture, they are also needed. Public relations officers that tell the world out there what's happening in the museum. Museum shop managers, and last one is occupational health and safety officers who tell you this is too dangerous, you can't do it. So you have to ensure that as well. And number two, large museums, but museum librarians, because some of them, their libraries have got substantial holdings. If you are interested in maintaining buildings and grounds, you're more a hands-on person, there's opportunity there. IT officers, IT network and website, and what's also getting important now is digitization of objects and labels and pictures. So nobody handles the original anymore, you just look at the picture. And then the guys in charge of finances and stuff. So there we got it. A lot of people work behind the scenes there. I probably left a few out, but I think I've said enough, Janelle. And Janelle will tell you what she's doing, and the goodies she packed out for you. So thanks for your.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much.